Okay, this should be good. So, welcome everybody. Uh, today, this for this week's session, we read the final part of the book, part three, Endgame, and he's talking about this section of the book is all about the modern Goliath or modern times, pretty much. So it seemed like the least amount of new information for me, at least. I don't know. So 16, he talks a lot about this idea that um, we're heading from a fossil fuel Goliath into a silicon Goliath or whatever. I don't know how he phrases it, but the idea that AI and all this new technology is going to be used basically to create a new type of autocratic empire. Um, and he goes through basically all the different threats that we currently have for civilizational collapse, which in his estimation would be really bad. Like he even talks about the possibility of complete human extinction. There is this idea. I thought it was interesting. This hadn't quite considered it this way before. There's this idea that um, we've averted some risks. We've traded like moderate risks for extreme risks, but that are less likely. So the idea of like creating nuclear weapons, for example, that okay, well, we have this mutually assured destruction now, so that reduces a lot of the risks of war, and so the wars are less common now, which is actually kind of not. He points out not quite the case, but uh, the trade off there is that you have this extreme risk of if a nuclear conflict does happen, the outcome, the results are much worse. So that's his idea of like trading off um, fewer risks but more extreme risks with our technological progress. So like yeah, he goes over nuclear war, environmental catastrophe, and AI and the rise of robots, stuff like that. Did I miss anything? I think that's pretty much it. I mean, all the usual suspects are there, we could say. Um,
It's a
and
good
yeah,
observation about the inversion. Like infant mortality is lower, but your chance of um, like you said, we moderated out the daily risks like infant mortality and polio, but
hmm
now you have a chance of um, I don't know. I mean, like
well, now we're more
there's
um,
like a 1%
we're,
chance of nuclear war at any given moment.
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that's a good thing, but yeah, that now we have like a lot of because of how interconnected we are the risks of a very deadly disease mutating and spreading are higher as well. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, global travel being what it is right
you're
now,
right.
like
COVID
could be
took
three
like
days.
like a very short
Yeah.
amount of time to travel the world. But yeah, and so I put one image into the chat, what he calls the tree of doom, which I thought was I like the some of the imagery here in the book, but I also was like, I don't know, maybe because I've read a lot of these types of books in the past, so like this doomer, it kind of feels doomer at times, but uh, it's not he's not wrong at the same time, right? But yeah, this tree of doom is like outlining a lot of uh, the risks of societal collapse that we currently have. Um, so yeah, and what engineered pandemics? That was one thing like I've heard about here and there, where like, oh, what if somebody engineered this super virus? And he said, this is actually not very likely. Like you need very specialized knowledge plus the in order to develop something like that, a super virus, and plus the willingness to want to kill all of humanity and blah blah blah. And he didn't seem as concerned about that, funnily enough. Um, but yeah, and he the first chapter on nuclear weapons is like one of the he spent quite a bit of time on that. I was kind of surprised, but I mean it makes sense. Like we're going through to back to a time of war, so it kind of makes sense to think about that. Um, anybody did any, what did anybody else? Mythos, do you have any memories of this section and things that stuck out to you, for example, or Anam or anybody
Well,
else here who read? Go ahead.
kind of similar to what you said, it's the usual suspects that we're all pretty familiar with, but I think it's still important to kind of restate them or wrap them up in his book. Um, I didn't really view it as doomerism. I mean, but that's in comparison to kind of everyday talk that we're enmeshed in, in our culture, anyways, which is maybe a sad thing. it's like yeah, we're on the brink somewhere around there.
Yeah,
Um, but he does give that kind of bit of hope as well as the reason he's going through this exercise is not to say sayonara. It's there's something you can still do about it if you try.
yeah. So, yeah, and obviously, if you're making a book about societal collapse and like applying it to our modern times, yeah, you're gonna go over some very doomer adjacent subjects. So I'm not, as I said, I understand why he has to do this, but there is like an epilogue which I almost skipped, and I'm glad I didn't. But I felt like the epilogue chapter should have been like half of the part three section, right? Like I feel like you could have condensed a lot of this. He could have condensed a lot of that stuff into like just a few chapters and really expanded the epilogue chapter, which I thought was okay. These are the core problems that we could address. But this often happens this way, where like authors are spend a long time going over the risks and possible, uh, you know, the subjects about like our extinction and societal collapse, and then they devote just like what seems like a few pages to solutions. But that being said, the epilogue chapter was really good. I enjoyed it. Uh, I don't know if you guys read it or not, but it was, I thought, really well done. I could even go over some of those things actually.
Yeah, go
So
Yeah,
for it.
please do.
yeah, so with the environment stuff, staying within planetary boundaries, like I think the main one aside from like electrifying and like decarbonizing, switching to renewables, was like cutting fossil fuel subsidies. So that's a really good one. That's a good one that's not talked about enough. I would say that like the fact that there are so many ways in which we're promoting the usage of fossil fuels, and subsidies are just an easy target, you would think, but there's also, I think there's a reason why they're hard to it's a hard thing to do politically, at least because the fossil fuel lobby is gonna not want that. um and then controlling AI. Yeah, he really thinks that uh AI is a big threat, and I can see that too. Just the way it's been developing is really concerning. But he thinks that we should own our data, I guess, to a certain degree. So like the AI company should have to pay for what they're using there, because currently they're not really paying for data. And if we did that, it would slow down the development of AI, basically, at least giving us some time to do something about it. Nuclear weapons. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a little more straight. No more talked about. He doesn't have. This is a. It's not. This is an age old problem. It's not an easy solution. But yeah, you need to. We have treaties and stuff like that. But if someone's gonna continue developing nuclear stockpiles, obviously that's going to concern other people who have nuclear weapons. So it's a tough problem. And then problem is power. He says that he wants like more democratic governments. I thought this was interesting. Like he stressed random assemblies of people because he feels that the average like randomly selected person would make more moral ethical decisions than the people in power pretty much. So when it comes to like certain things, I guess like deciding on questions like should data be uh should AI companies have to pay for data? Like people in power might say no, but the average person might say yes. Like, and his point was also like when it came to developing the nuclear weapon, like most people would probably say no, we shouldn't do that, but the people in power did, even though there was no real reason to develop a nuclear weapon because the Germans never, I don't know if you guys are familiar with you guys have seen Oppenheimer, the movie. They kind of go over it in there. They thought the
Yeah.
Germans were developing a weapon, and that was the whole reason. Because okay, we have to. If the Germans get the weapon, that would be a world-ending threat. But that was turned out never was the case. So they were just developing a nuclear weapon. um, so yeah, a lot of like democratizing things, decision making, uh, ranked choice voting, all that stuff. Addressing inequality is a big one for him. That's why I think this is like very much in line with anarchist thought in some places. Um, democratic control of information in the military, and with technology and production. Yeah. Um,
One,
yeah. Go ahead.
oh, sorry, I thought you were at the end. Go on, keep going.
Okay. No, I mean, it pretty much was. The last thing I remember was like, "Don't be a dick." So I don't know. Like that's something like okay, basically just saying like don't support these power structures, don't work for them, don't whatever. Vote against their interests and stuff like that. Don't be dominated. Yeah, recultivate the institutions that act as what you call it, checks and balances to Goliaths. Yeah. But yeah, definitely AI and data. Data, he says, is like the newest and most important lootable resource that is fueling Goliath. So okay. That was about it. You can go ahead now.
I was just going to comment on the nuclear thing with the Trinity test. I don't think he says this explicitly in the book, but I've heard him in a podcast talk about a little thought experiment where he ties in these citizen juries. So he calls it like the Trinity jury experiment. And he's saying like, yeah, if you were at that time, you had the facts that the Germans weren't actually pursuing the bomb anymore. And there was this, I think that one guy who calculated like a 1% chance it could ignite the atmosphere and literally kill all living life on the planet, possibly in the universe if we're the only ones. But if you were the average, plumber, housewife, just random citizen jury, would you vote to take the chance to launch or ignite the Trinity test? And the experiment is probably no if you had all that information and you were solid about it. But the powers that be are overriding what the average person would probably want.
Yeah, because I think he's of the mind too that like people in power seem to be more pre-selected for having like psychopathic traits. Not to say that there's necessarily psychopathic, but yeah, they would not. They're less moral and ethical, I guess you could say. He would is what is something he's getting at. They tend to be at least. Um,
Yeah,
so
he points out two angles of that. Is like one is, yeah, a lot of these people tend to be that what they call the dark triad characteristics,
mhm.
but he says we can't blame it all on them because you also have other factors like power corrupts. So the
Hmm.
more power you have, you become, even if you don't have dark triad traits, you still can become corrupted. That's kind of a normal trend.
Yeah, I remember Dark
Because
Triad.
otherwise, it's kind of fatalism.
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
sorry.
What were the Dark Triad traits
It's
again?
narcissism, Machiavellianism, and forgetting the third one.
Yeah, I
Dark
couldn't look for
triad. Let
it.
me look it up. Oh yeah, I
It's
spelled it
basically
wrong.
like sociopathic manipulation. You know.
Yeah,
Oh, and yeah, and psychopathy. Psychopathy.
yeah,
So Machiavellianism was strategic manipulation, narcissism, excessive self-regard, and psychopathy, callousness, and lack of empathy.
yeah. Basically saying, yeah, the people who tend to get into power, and he's saying the people who tend to get into power, at least like within our institutional arrangements, are favored for having dark triad traits. Is the idea, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you know, Nixon, Hillary Clinton, Bibi Netanyahu, like
Yeah,
you stay in power for you stay in power not by being. I mean, but the thing is that I had my best friend who was a Clinton supporter. Like he says, you want someone like Nixon, and I'm like, you know what? We all really wish we had like some MF who could just like bulldoze the opposition and pass an agenda, or even Lyndon Johnson, right? Like I mean, he's
hmm
viewed way more favorably than Nixon, but what's the difference? A lot of
yeah.
color grabbing.
I feel like okay, that's also like a certain view of the world, that the world is like inherently dog eat dog, and so
Yeah,
even you're the reason you would want a Nixon or strongman or a Machiavellian in power is because you're assuming that the other people, the people you're competing against, are also thinking that way, but that's not necessarily the case um all the time. uh but yeah, it's kind of like it's a constructed world in a way, right? The fact that if you are thinking that way, you're helping to promote the type of world that we all don't want to live in, pretty much. But we do it anyway, like because it's normal, and it's about survival and stuff like that. But I guess his point is that that's kind of like that's just a moral license that we're giving ourselves, for one, but also that most people aren't like that, and that they don't want to live in a world like that ultimately. But you know this is the trap of also like it. I forget what the argument is here. Is it traditionalism or something like that? Argument from traditionalism saying that this is the, or argument from nature, maybe, that's to say that this is just the way the world works. Um, yeah,
yeah. I mean, you could
Yep.
justify a lot.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think I may be mixing up books and podcasts here, but I think it's kind of like in our previous egalitarian cells, we go to great pains to squash the dark triad people to begin with. Every time they
yeah,
pop up, we're like, nah.
right.
But once they grab power, then you get locked into this false narrative that that's the way it is, and no, it can be. And then you seek more strong men to fix the problems that have been, were small once, until you get to, the collapse part.
Yeah, and he constantly, like, he really likes to go back to Cahokia for that as an
Right.
example of that. Like I thought it was interesting. It actually gave me the idea of like that would make an interesting, like, what if all book about a future, a post collapse future, where you have people telling stories about what our society right now is like, and how they want to, they like the stories that and songs that they'll tell each other are about the vices of our society and stuff like that. And I thought that's an interesting idea. uh what
Yeah, I
led
kind of
the
touched on
world to
this.
collapse? Go ahead, sorry.
I may have touched on this in a previous conversation. That same idea exactly. Is that the stories are important for those reasons to remind people that, you know, like the Cahokia or however you pronounce it. You know, they made these stories of the emperor or whatever it was that got too. He was a good gambler, and then he coaxed everyone into building the big house for him, and then they rebelled against him. And you know, we have to remember that that's our story. That was a bad thing.
Yeah. Well, I think even the stories that people tell about the Roman Empire are kind of like that, right? Like that there's moral collapse. There's a lot of stories that we tell about why Rome collapsed, and some of them are a little bit off, I would say. To now, like, you have people say that will say like things like hard times create hard men,
Yeah,
hard
good
hard
times or hate soft men.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
and so you have
And
a
that's
lot
why
of
we're all
different things.
soy
Yeah.
boys, you
Yeah,
know,
that's now. Yeah, right now we're in the good times, and we're soft because hard men
yeah,
created good our good times.
because we let trans people
Yeah,
compete in like you know,
yeah,
so
yeah, right.
um
Uh,
sorry, please continue.
how's it? No, I mean, yeah, there's lots of other things I remember people telling us, like stories about the Roman emperors, for example, as being becoming
Yeah, I mean
vain
it's
and
bread and
ethically bad.
circuses, corruption, um you know, like bread and circuses, and then not for nothing also like Christianity also, you know, like it's a softer religion than the Roman religion. So, but no, but then the converse is also Christianity would say like the Romans would have orgies and feasts, like,
Yeah,
and it's
right, right.
probably true. But when you're so successful, but like you're moralizing the success. But you know, a Roman feast was when you're done eating, you put your fingers in your mouth and you vomit all of everything. You purge yourself, and then you eat more because like there's like duck and squid on the table, so you got to make
Oh,
room, right?
oh God.
So, but so some of it is true. Also, there's a recipe for cooking duck in a Roman cookbook. You cook the thing alive, like you douse it in oil and you set it
Oh
on
man.
fire. Everybody watches it flap around. So, like this kind of cruelty and hedonism is what the Romans are blamed for, especially in like so. Gibbons is writing the history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, and he's in the British Empire, 1880s, the peak of the British Empire, and he's giving those same signals like you know if you're gonna be immoral and like the Romans are, then you're gonna decline too. But if you're like civic duty and civic virtue is as high as the Republic was, then you're gonna rule forever.
Yeah, but I think that's also missing the point. Um, by the way, when you were saying that, it kind of also reminded me of the Umayyads, who kind of like had a similar.
Yeah.
I remember they had a similar story, like about how they used to have orgies and all that stuff, and that's there's some reliefs of Umayyad parties. I think that probably a little similar, but yeah, no, but I think all that is kind of missing the point of like it's not. I mean, virtue does take place, is a piece of it in the sense that like Kemp says, societies will become uh the more power is centered and controlled centrally, uh the less and the more what you call it, selfish people who wield power get, the less good decision making that will happen for the benefit of the whole society. And so there is, like, you could say that's like an issue of virtue, but I think like what a lot of people will talk about with regards to virtue and like fall of empire and all that is like, oh, people start to become gay or something, or they have too much promiscuous sex or something like that, and that's a part of the moral decline, when it's not quite the case. Uh, but yeah, like, because the Victorian era in Britain, like you were mentioning, it was definitely those were definitely part of the values that they held, I would say. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Like I mean, again, and you know, Gibbon is the one who, like, kind of cast Roman history like into the modern psyche. Um, and he does blame it basically on like moral decline and corruption. Like I think, but I mean, there's something to be said. You can imagine though, like politicians became politicians in Rome. Like bread and circuses used to be paid for by the senators and the emperor, but then by the time you have like the late emperors, they were using the public purse to pay for like their own things. So I mean, look, I mean, one of the things we don't want to talk about is like migration of peoples and how the Romans weren't able to absorb the migration of peoples. They would like tell the outlying tribes like you can't come in, and then when they were attacked by Huns or steppe people, those pressures would be too much for Rome to bear. So I don't know. I think like
Well, he
sometimes
actually
we draw the
he
wrong
kind of
conclusion.
described it as a Ponzi scheme, right? Like the way that they would pay their soldiers is like through looting of resources through new conquests. So it's like, okay, well, we need more soldiers to kind of like control this area. But we don't actually have the money to pay for their wages, so we'll just conquer new areas and loot more of their resources, and that's how we'll pay for them. And until the day came when they had this huge, I think it was like 500,000 man army at their height, and they just couldn't pay their wages anymore. And it got to the point also where they were starting to use mercenaries, right? And those are the people that eventually sacked Rome, were the Germanic mercenaries, where they were just paying. Um, so I remember him saying that. I thought that was an interesting way to put it. Like the Roman Empire was this big Ponzi scheme, although it did last for a lot longer than a Ponzi scheme should. So, uh,
Yeah, like I mean, that's how conquest kind of is. Like even like I did a history on the Islamic conquest, like, and if you just watch the show Vikings, which I really like, but the idea is like, if you have a new marauding group, like when you think about Catholic England, like they had jewels encrusted on their chalices for doing communion, right? So if you
mhm.
just attack one church and you get away with like a couple of silver candlesticks and ruby encrusted chalices. The opulence that they've been like even Henry VIII, what he did was he there were hundreds of monasteries that he shut down, and he stole all their lands and heavily taxed the rest. But that's actually where Oxford and Cambridge come from. They were estates held by monks, and Henry VIII made them part of the crown. And in Catholic histories, it's written like these monks uh, uh, were reduced to begging in the streets because they used to live in these lavish monasteries,
Mhm.
but now like they're totally destitute. But yeah, so anytime like you kind of like you're and it's kind of a natural redistribution of resources, like the steppes peoples too. Like we tell history in the sense of like, okay, Rome, China, India, the Arabs and Byzantines, but the people in the steppes were constantly putting pressures on the civilized societies, and every couple of hundred years or a couple of thousand years they were just smashing everything. So you can tell it from the story of the people who built civilizations or the people who, you know, um, put pressures on civilizations from the beginning.
Yeah, actually, I don't know if you're familiar with what's his name, Dan Carlin, the Hardcore History podcast, but he
Yeah, the
had,
comedian too, right?
yeah, he's is that the same name? Really? I didn't. Maybe I never
Oh, it's a
realized that.
different person. Okay,
No,
cool.
yeah, no, the History podcast. I think his name's Dan Carlin anyway, but
Yeah, it is.
he has a series on the Viking Age where he frames it as, which I'd never thought about it this way before, but the Charlemagne's invasion into what we call like the East German territories, the Saxony territories, we could say territories of the Saxons, created the conditions that fueled the Viking Age pretty much, because you'd have like displacement of peoples, a looting of their wealth, and so there was actually a lot of Saxon refugees that went to Denmark pretty much. uh, and viewed that way, you could see the Viking raids as kind of like a retaliation for the Empire of Charlemagne's encroachment onto their lands and territories. Um, Not just this huge, I don't know, random devil people, which no one, obviously, no one really takes that seriously anymore. But for a long time, the Vikings were just seen as these devils from the east, right now. So, but there's causes and effects for everything, we could say. Um,
Yeah. Did you want to say something, Mythos?
No, I was just saying, like, yeah, Dan Carlin's the history guy, but George Carlin is the comedian.
yeah, George Carlin. Okay, yeah,
Okay, thank you.
great comedian, by the way. There's a few people
I've
who
only,
like I would really be curious about like their take on modern issues, and he's one of them. Which I wish he was still around to say
yeah, he
things.
got some pretty straightforward takes on consumerism and religion and stuff
Hmm.
like that.
You were mentioning the Ponzi scheme. So I recently Caesar probably killed 1 million Gauls, and when you look at all these pressures, um, that like Rome created, um, and in order to make your name in Rome, you basically had to have like military victories, and that's why like later emperors, like if Vespasian has to go to like Syria or Palestine or something, but Caesar kind of just like did everything up there. So now you have to go towards Persia and actually battle the Persians and stuff instead of like Celtic hippies. But um, but also so on the note of the chapter about he's talking about AI a lot, and he
Yeah,
talks about
is
killer
the
drones.
yeah, right.
We are, I remember Elon once said, Elon Musk, he once said that like we are already at the stage where like you and me can buy a consumer drone and it'll have the facial recognition technology, and you could also basically tell it to like find somebody on their balcony, and it has like a gun or an explosive or a trigger. You could just program it,
Mm.
and now you're in the stage of like you and me can like autonomously kill somebody on their own balcony with like a flying drone, with off
Huh.
the shelf technology basically. um, so forget about like like somebody trying to make like rice and explosives through like beans or something, or
Wow.
like a pressure cooker explosive. Now you're just um but so the idea, but for me though, even worse than killer drones, we have to remember there's this idea of a surveillance society. So if you think about apartheid or something, any kind of apartheid situation in the world then and now, it would be so much easier just to keep people in line if you knew that like before and after work there's a drone like flying behind you. There's a
Yeah,
drone like making sure like you making sure like your
and
population
it
doesn't
can't
like
be
go
traced.
into the, yeah, right, and or go into the Afrikaner neighborhoods or whatever. Like it's very easy to keep two people socially segregated if like one is in a prison Bantustan, like just controlled by drone flights. And this game Metal Gear Solid always showed that like mercenary armies. So the very idea of a state would change. Remember, if we go through collapse, right, and it doesn't exactly look like collapse, it's more like a decentralized series of states. Like a fifth of the world owned by Elon, and a fifth of the world owned by Meta, and a
Yeah.
fifth of the world owned by Sundar Pichai and Satya Nadella. So we're just controlled by their drones, their police drones, and just taking universal basic healthcare and universal basic income through like our corporate overlords. And it doesn't have to be quite so terrifying as like Terminator Skynet. Oh yeah, but
I
That
like
sorry,
that
one
that.
is
last
Go
thing.
ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Future mercenary armies too, by the way. So like future drone armies like Metal Gear Solid 2 as well. Like you can have mech warriors, and that just patrols like areas like Gaza and Congo. And like all we need, like the sheep, we just need like a drone flying over us, and that's enough.
what you're describing about the world being divided between these mega guys is basically the same world that show Alien Earth is painting. Is
Yeah.
exactly this, where it's divided up by corporations, and
Oh yeah.
your life is pretty good, but you're basically a slave at the same time.
Yeah, and they are the law. There's no UN.
They are
It's
the
whatever the
exactly.
five whatever the five companies work out. That's like the world treaty.
I
Yeah.
know,
And
and you look at that and you go, that's not too far off from reality.
Yeah.
no,
Well, yeah, I would argue, yeah, it's because kind of already the case to a certain degree, like uh corporations like can go anywhere in the world and they have all the power to kind of like multinational corporations we could say to do like whatever they want. If they don't like an arrangement in a certain country, they can go to another one. So they have it. I think it would be accurate to describe like the modern empire in terms of like a private sector company or because yeah, I mean oftentimes in political science we're talking about the great powers of like Russia, China, US and Europe and but like yeah, it's pretty much
Austria-Hungary.
yeah. Yeah, but I think that some places in academia like are too used to the old contexts to try to think of what actually uh what is actually more important in the modern context. But yeah, is and isn't it great that our new overlords are spending so much money on these doomsday bunkers because like they seem to know what's happening and they out of anyone else in the world have the most power to do something about it and they're just kind of like throwing up their hands and and just like well if something does happen I'll be good so it's okay and then but I like the line in the book where they talk to we should talk about that chapter if we can too the aftermath like what the world would look like after a collapse but if a collapse does happen an event that like kills I don't know 40 to 60% of the human population um they're just there in their bunkers and they have their guards and they have their friends maybe but like how do they trust their guards and their consultants are telling them well you might want to start like building a relationship and with the your guards right now so that way once things goes down you're on good terms and they kind of roll their eyes they're like really i have to like I have to be friends with people like it's crazy it's insane how psychopathic they come off in some of these accounts of them and what was I gonna say? Yeah, because pretty much once society breaks down and you're just there, like I don't know, you're in a bunker that's you're trying to create a new society with like all the former arrangements are out. Like who's to say that they're okay? They could say like, okay, I'm the one who owns this bunker, and people could say, yeah, but I have a gun, so I don't know. So, huh, it's interesting. Um, but
Yeah.
then that's where the robots come back into play, right? Because the potential solution to that is like, well, don't have like human guards with guns. Have like autonomous robots that enforce your new dictatorship, right? Um, it's insane.
I posted in the voice chat, text chat, um, a nice table I saw from the first chapter from this section, and what I just thought about though, like one thing we have to keep in mind, a single natural event, can actually trigger. Like he's talking about how, you have a risk, and you have a collapse, and you have decimation, and then you have human extinction. And like it's kind of, I mean, the chart almost seems to say that you could have a domino effect where all these things are horrible, but like your mind just like needs to think about how exponentially horrible we're talking about, like where human extinction is part of the equation, or and I like that Jurassic Park has life extinction is not really here. The cockroaches will evolve at some point. We're not too worried about the planet. It's just about what we do to our own supply chain.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about a single global a solar flare. It could fry our electrical grid, right? So you don't have to worry about these robots, right? Because who's going to charge those batteries? And because you fry the whole electrical grid, um, and I remember like NASA has a satellite going around the sun, and the satellite was there, but the Earth was there just 2 weeks before. But it would have fried everything on the Earth, and that means even like the hard drives would have been wiped. So basically, unless you had buried a computer underground or something, there's no data anywhere. So when you just think about the information, even that informational collapse of society, like at the end of Fight Club, they blow up three credit factories and credit union buildings, and I'm not necessarily against that, right? So I think a well-timed solar flare might achieve the same effect. If we could wipe out everybody's credit reports at the same time. But that kind of natural effect, though, leads to all the other effects, which is the catastrophic risk and decimation.
That reminded me actually though that one of his policy proposals was a global debt jubilee, and uh, I don't think you guys were around when we were reading Debt by David Graeber, but that's one thing that came
That's
up was like,
genius.
well, and it's funny when you look historically how often solution an easy solution it was to like so many issues, because yeah, like debts eventually rack up and they become unpayable, and you have that's how like a lot of very what would you call it, subservient and slave slave like civilizations emerged, and or slave like situations maybe we could say. But obviously people wouldn't stand for that, usually for very long. So the jubilee, which means basically a debt forgiveness, is like was periodically a thing that rulers would do. um but now it just
John,
seems like it seems impossible, it seems unthinkable to try to do something like that.
let me just pause it. It's actually from the Bible. I think it's in Deuteronomy or Numbers. But so every 7 years, right? If you're and most people were farmers, you're not allowed to sow the edges of your field. Like poor people can pick the edges. Well, actually, even any time of year, the edges of your field you can't pick because that's for anybody traveling. And then 7 times 7 is 49 years. And every 49 years, the Torah says that you have to forgive everybody's debts. And that's why it's called the Jubilee year. It's a celebration. But not a bad idea. Every 49 years, you forgive all the bankruptcies.
Yeah, it's funny that there seems to be some Christian religious justification for it too. You'd think in Christian societies that would be that would be talked about a little bit. At least I don't know. But no, it's just interesting how it seems unthinkable, like an unthinkable thing to do, because maybe it speaks to how
Yeah, it's
much
like
how much we
anathema and
value.
capitalism.
Yeah, well, it
Like
speaks to how
forgiving,
much we
like
value money. Like we value money and
yeah,
capital so much that even a
like
religious justification couldn't convince us.
we don't throw you in debtor's jail, but being bankrupt, not able to like get a car loan, a home loan, except at extortionate rates, that
Yeah,
is like basically being in a financial, like negative social
yeah,
points.
right, right, right.
Like China, basically, right? Like social credit system. That's our social credit system. Like,
Mm-hmm.
go pay 30% interest on a car, you piece
Oh
of
yeah, what
shit.
who was it in this book or something else that I read recently? It might have been something else. Where they talked about, they compared the social credit system to the actual our capitalist credit system, and how the capitalist credit system operates a lot more like what how Westerners, their image of the Chinese social credit system, which was apparently a very limited thing and doesn't really exist anymore. I think.
It's not as
Uh,
draconian
yeah,
as we think it is. Yeah.
yeah. It's funny how, like, okay, there was like a Black Mirror episode maybe or something
Yeah.
that like people are like, oh my god, this is like China, communist China,
Yeah.
and And it turns out like our credit system is a lot more draconian than anything in China. But in terms of like the social credit system. But yeah.
There's a fiction book I want to plug. Larry Niven is a famous sci-fi writer from the 60s and 70s,
Hmm.
and he wrote a book called Lucifer's Hammer, and how we thought this asteroid was gonna miss the Earth, but every time it came closer, it went from like 1,000,000 to 1 to 1,000 to 1 to like 100 to 1 to 25 to 1, and then like the astronauts on the ISS basically watched the comet hit the Earth,
Mm.
and there's tsunamis on the coast, and basically the reason it's called Lucifer's Hammer is because like basically it's almost like the devil himself had taken a hammer and very precisely struck the Earth. Um, but actually, so the thing is though, and it's a lot of 70s motifs in there, like the Black Panthers take over after the tsunami hits or whatever, because like, or before the tsunami hits, because if the police aren't going to respond, there's going to be obviously the minority gangs taking over and things like. But more importantly, so the U.S. Army is like supposed to keep preservation of the government or whatever, but instead, like all the small towns inland, they take over the grocery stores and make a fiefdom for themselves. So, and there's one line in there. I'll end with this. It just kind of says like, people are pretty nice in like a stable, democratic, peaceful society. Like, I don't want to brag here, but let's say I bought a homeless guy a bus fare, a while ago or something.
Nice.
It
Good
says that
good
the
deed.
amount. Yeah, we all do good deeds now and then. Help a old lady cross the street. But if that kind of apocalypse comes, where like there's societal collapse, you and me would be capable of the most conniving, scheming, twisted truth, deceitful, murderous acts, in order to secure a car with gas in it or a gun with automatic weapon fire. And, we're all friends here, but the backstabbing that's going to go on, there's not going to be any more decent citizens of a decent republic that we all grew up in.
Well, one point that he made though was that societal collapse is like we have a certain image in our mind. I think you described that the best. Kind of like I don't know, The Walking Dead um
Mm-hmm.
or or those images. I remember if you remember Hurricane Katrina of like it seemed like complete anarchy, but in reality, what he says is much more often what happens, but is not like as sensational. Maybe is like people tend to help each other out a lot as well. But that's like not seen as much, and that it's actually people are also capable of tremendous kindness in times in hard and during hard times. So, um, but it actually kind of in some cases can strengthen the bonds and duties
Social
that
bonds.
people feel towards one another. So that's
I guess I'm not disagreeing
yeah.
with you, but I guess my point would be like in Japan when there is like a earthquake or a tsunami warning, you're just supposed to walk towards higher ground, and you're not really supposed to. Let's say someone's in a wheelchair, like the polite thing is to like not take them to higher ground because like you're gonna get trapped and you're gonna drown. So like everybody kind of has this thing where like I don't know, I I can only imagine.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that. I don't know. I thought it was interesting to think about. I do think there is some truth to that. That people can be more selfish. Maybe it depends on the severity of the conditions. I don't
Cataclysm.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if it's literally like I need to like I need to sacrifice you so that because my death is imminent. Like maybe most people would
Right.
do that.
All of our debts are imminent.
My death is like I'm gonna die like right now unless I sacrifice somebody else. Maybe that's a situation where you wouldn't see as much altruism. I don't know. It's a tough one. Um,
And I mean, just extended, right? Not only food but gasoline, for example. Like I think if we're in a post-apocalypse world, gasoline might be something you have to like kill a stranger for. Just saying
yeah,
from the Walking Dead aspect.
yeah, I know,
Like
but I do want to like temper that that view of society. I do like the idea that societal collapse, like, but in
We're gonna
large
be
part
stronger.
historically, yeah. Well, yeah. They goad out a more altruistic side of people that we don't usually see, and that actually we're more selfish now because we have so much. There's so much abundance in that. There's people are climbing the
Yeah,
social
we
ladder,
literally don't give a
moving.
rat's ass about drowning migrants in the
Yeah,
Mediterranean, for example.
yeah, pretty much. But maybe that's just because we've been trained to only think about ourselves and, not be as concerned with the
Yeah,
plight of people, especially
there's
people that don't share our citizenship, right? Like
right,
we hardly care about homeless people who are citizens of the same country, much less
right.
non-citizens. I mean, this is
That we
that's
find ways to like rationalize their
that's
treatment,
yeah,
which is worse, right?
yeah. That's also maybe that's a very American perspective. I have a friend who would say that the stress on citizenship thing is like also more American, but I don't know. I think it's hard to say when there's like a
There's
rise
a
in nationalism.
Kemp brought up in a podcast. I don't know if he did in the book, but a simple idea that I hadn't considered before is, how you have a lot of cultures today who are very much into, when someone shows up at your door, you be very generous to them. You give them a lot of food. You give them places to sleep and whatever. He would say there's evidence of Paleolithic man, and they would have these large geographic networks with other groups, and they would
Yeah,
exchange gifts as part of this because, like, if they had a drought in one area, they'd go to the nice people they've been exchanging gifts with and stay with them for a while until it passed, and vice versa. So it's kind of a way to, like, keep the door open and be recognize that you're something bad is going to happen to you sooner or later. You need to rely on others.
yeah. That's another great point he brought up is that we evolved with that kind of strategy too. Like as we were, um, if we want to talk about like our nature, like that would be a big part of it too. Is like interacting with and befriending strangers. And didn't he say at one point how the hunter gatherer bands or whatever that like I guess we have an image of them being very tribalistic, like all of the same family, but that wasn't necessarily the case. Like they were comprised of people who were like strangers who like migrated into them at some point too.
Yeah, that's the same idea. Is like he's describing this as being these really fluid and interconnected, wide geographically, but also intermeshed in that same way. We weren't just these like kinlocked kind of small Dunbar number tribes necessarily. I'm
Yeah,
sure there
right.
was some, but it wasn't like the norm.
Yeah, that's another
And he
really.
speculates that
Go ahead.
the Neanderthals may part of their extinction may have come to that because they were more like that and less resilient in that way.
Oh yeah, I remember that now. Okay, which is sad. I'm of the idea that I wish the Neanderthals had made it. That would be really interesting to have another human species. Just all the
There's
questions
got
we
to be
would
a book
have.
in there somewhere.
Yeah, yeah,
Be an interesting sci-fi book, fantasy book. Yeah.
I want to say at the beginning he has a line that I really love. The person mining cobalt, um, and for microchips used by all of us today, usually a child even. And so the owner of that microchip, AI factory is like worth a million times that guy. And so, when you mentioned bunkers, I just thought like they know this. They know this full well that like the child in the Congo getting their cobalt, and not for nothing there's like a war right now, like Rwanda is taking over the Congo, and Rwanda is now like an agent of the multinational companies because like basically they're happy with whoever is able to get them the cobalt, right? They don't really care of who the government is in, Kinshasa. So, I do think like that's why they are building bunkers and stuff. They kind of know that like their survival and our survival is like getting more and more antithetical.
Are you talking about?
Well, yeah, and I think
Go ahead.
I'm just saying, like, I think they're trapped in their own trap. They have drank their own Kool-Aid that it's inevitable that if they don't do it, someone else will, and or mix in some status seeking, mixed within super elites that just keep stacking up with no end. And it's like they're kind of stupid in that way, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean they're
Because
I
not
had a
they're
letter.
not coming off great to the wider public. Like the feelings towards billionaires is not great. I wonder how aware they are about that, and they must be feeling a little bit uh threatened
Yeah.
in general.
But if they can buy our government, I think they feel like they're pretty secure.
I mean, all it takes is one killer drone, right? Like Elon Musk said. That was also probably not the greatest thing for him to share with the general public. Like, oh man, if you know you can, uh, it's a bit how easy it is. You can just take somebody out. Like, if I were Elon Musk, I probably wouldn't share that information because, uh,
You know, I had a friend in college. She was a Stalinist. Like she loved Stalin. It was hard for me to take her seriously at the time, but I have more respect for her now looking back because she did teach me some really cool things. But she taught me one, for example, one sentence that I always remember her for. She always repeated it. A capitalist will sell you the rope with which to hang themselves with. So
yeah.
I think they know. Like,
I mean, it didn't used to be like
you know,
this is a new thing too. Like, I still remember the time when Bill Gates was like, he had this defense. He had the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, right? And he was like, "Well, yes, I am a billionaire. I'm the wealthiest man in the world, but I use my wealth for good, for charity." And even though like he was still a part of the problem, and largely benefiting from the capitalist system and influencing it, doing very terrible things, billionaires used to have they always had that philanthropy to fall back on, and that's actually that was one of the tools in their toolboxes. I feel like the modern day wealthy class, just don't even care to have that veneer
sure,
anymore. Like they don't have
Carnegie,
yeah.
Mellon.
It's a very powerful tool for them to use. I'm surprised. Like, are they just stupider now, or like, or they just don't care? I don't.
Well, no, I think they're still doing that just in a different way by developing tech. The tech is the new charity of the world. It's if you can build it, it'll save us all kind of mentality. I
Oh,
think they
right,
still
right.
are involved in that mentality very much. They want the status. They think they're doing the good thing. They're like I won't pull in that reference, but anyways, they
I
think
think
they're doing good. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was gonna bring this up anyway, but it kind of look. Let me phrase it to you this way, and I think I'm being like a billionaire shill here, right? But look, this is what the system is. The system is like liberalism itself involves scientific exploration. Like when we started exploring the world, we also started colonizing the world, right, and then enslaving the world. So like, there's something about liberalism that's connected to racism. The history of the age of exploration is the history of world conquest as well, right, by Europe, but also the history of the Renaissance and the scientific revolution and the industrial revolution, therefore. So look, you have a choice, right? You could either keep industrializing, centralizing, advancing scientific knowledge at the cost of resource extraction unlimited, or you could do this whole we want wealth equality stuff. And then you'd be slowing down the knowledge acquisition, you'd be slowing down the resource acquisition slash extraction, and you'd be slowing down the progress, which has resulted in China being the success of the world, where you have the almost eradication of extreme poverty in China compared to like India, which has a similar population. So, do you guys want to hold up human history and human knowledge and the cure to cancer like next year, or do you want to like keep on going with this like wealth inequality stuff? It's up to you.
Yeah, the or in the long run that you painted, I think will end up better for humanity. The former will end quicker.
like so that means I mean I almost want to say then, since I've just made the argument, I would take the technological singularity, right? I mean, if we can get that soon and like cure everything, I think some kids in the Congo, and obviously these aren't my kids and this isn't my childhood, but like
Well,
having
I
some
think like
child
Luke
labor
Kemp
in
points
Congo.
out, I think rightfully so, also kind of like how kind of insane like that bet is, though. The idea that, oh, once we get
I agree.
AG
Thank you for saying that.
once we get AGI, it's just going to solve all our problems. It's kind of like, we you do this with climate change too. Like when you look at future emissions and decarbonization, like the target we need to get to stay below 2 degrees or something like that. There's a lot of space in there for like new innovations that will come about that will say, okay, well, what 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 is that going to look? You're betting that, okay, well, yes, we need to do this. It's not enough. We're still gonna come up with short for our targets, but it's okay. The future technology, the innovations that people will come up with will clear the gap there. And I always thought that was kind of like irresponsible too, because like you can't like plan for innovations like that. I mean, yeah, it's we could like have a big breakthrough in nuclear fusion tomorrow, for example. We pretty much wouldn't have much of an issue anymore, I think, right? But I think it's irresponsible to bet on that. And especially with the way that artificial intelligence is being developed and rolling out, there's no indication that it's doing so in a way that's broadly beneficial. It seems to be going the opposite way right now. So yeah, it's that's the
Right.
basic rebuttal to that point.
Especially with water resources and electricity being more expensive and land being more expensive. Like it's not solving anything. Like okay, yeah, maybe electricians are making 100,000 or 250,000 a year, which is great, but
Yeah, and I mean, I agree, Benjamin, with what you're saying, and also that a lot of I think it's kind of a modern myth that we need all these innovations to save us, but the myth is, well, we wouldn't need them if we didn't have them in the first place, and we wouldn't have them in the first place if we didn't go down this path necessarily.
Yeah, it's I think the solutions are there already. We have, but it's just they're unpopular, or they're contrary to I guess what Luke Kemp would say, the Goliath's interests. So they want to like subsidizing fossil fuels, for example. That's a really easy would be a really easy and big way to start uh making a real impact. But um obviously like it's not even up for discussion, it feels like, which is a shame.
Yeah, that's the other thing that's been brought up too, is it's all the ideas are laying around. It's just, and we just, all we have to do is pick them up, and everyone has to pick them up and start talking about them. But we're trapped in this inevitability kind of doomerism. Like, no, this way is that we're going is the only way there could be, the only way there ever was. And what are you going to do about it? Shrug your shoulders.
Mhm. It's argument
But no, they're
from
just, it's like, no, you just got to pick up those ideas and you got to just start talking about them and not dismiss them out of hand.
it's argument from tradition or nature again, like this.
One of those. Yeah.
Yeah.
to argue about paradox again, as much as they're billionaires and they make a million times more than any of us, um, they also know, especially like since COVID, people run everything. People run stores, Macy's, and universities and everything. So like at the same time, their wealth is built upon like the masses. Like they wouldn't be. So they kind of, I don't know. It's for me. It's very hard to think about what goes through their head. Um, Mostly because like I can't go into space on a whim, but um I think like they need they are aware of they are aware of like the rest of us actually, as much as like they try to act like they're in the stratosphere. Um, so Yanis Varoufakis, who was a left-wing finance minister of Greece during the
Uh-huh.
Euro crisis
Mm-hmm.
when Greece was collapsing around like
We know him.
2007, 2008.
He's
Okay, good. Oh, good.
techno feudalism, which is also like very much
Yes. So his idea is to tax every single AI transaction for $5. And that's the only way, because you can't like break up the monopoly. Like you can't break up Google search, because Google search's whole definition is built upon you having a comprehensive view of the internet. So you kind of need to let them be monopolies. But his idea is you just put a tax on their like AI, and then that's how you can like send the money back to us. um I think he has a lot of insights in this regard.
yeah. I wouldn't
Yeah, I
mind
read his
reading
book.
you read techno feudalism? What do you think of that
Yeah,
one?
I liked it. Yeah, I'll just say that I have questioned some of his ideas at the end of the book, but I think his general assessment at the front of the book is very interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
I
it's
haven't read it.
kind of sounds like what it is, right? Like it's the idea that tech companies are instating a new form of uh feudal political system on everybody. Is that it?
He he's gone as far as to declare capitalism dead because of that. He says it's not we're already there, and at least in the tech sector, and he points out a lot of areas where even though it seems like maybe they don't have that kind of control, they reach into everything else that you do, the tech, that it's effectively a feudal system that you're paying into, or you're sorry, you're a servant. What serf? That's the word I couldn't think of.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, just the fact that they don't
Yeah.
pay for their main input of data is kind of insane, seems like, right? Like they're just getting that for free. Okay, and that's how they make
Yeah,
their
they get to
money.
violate copyright while we have to like get cease and desist letters for torrents, but they use the whole Anna's library and Anna's archive, and
Yeah.
they paid for it too. And the Internet Archive. They're just like, who wants money? Just give us your pirated libraries. Um,
Oh my God.
the I was gonna say about that techno feudal thing. Um, they sorry, I forgot.
It's okay. I was just gonna say it reminded me like I don't know if you guys are familiar with abundance liberals, the term that came out about recently. I think
Yeah.
it got popularized by New York Times columnist or whatever. And they're like, well, they're proposing a third way, right? Um, and it's exactly like what we described is the solution to our problems is more growth, more innovation, more abundance. Like if we continue if we continue to invest and grow, then that will somehow solve our problems. So I just wanted to give them a
Including
shout
debt.
out. Yeah, I just
Hmm.
wanted to give them a shout out because they seem to be exactly like who Luke Kemp is
Oh
talking
yeah.
about and part of the problem. Big, I mean,
I'm glad you guys mentioned Varoufakis says that capitalism is dead, because right, we're always talking about late stage capitalism in the context of postmodernity. So you'll see that phrase used up in these kind of circles. Oh yeah, we're in late stage capitalism. This is globalization where we have no culture. It's all pastiche, and now the corporations run everything. But we're really in a post. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I want to thank both of you for bringing up that fact, because like we're not in late stage capitalism anymore. That was like 20 years ago.
yeah, I mean, I
Yeah,
think when you have like control of the market and so much kind of a what you call it agglomeration is the word maybe I want to use, where you have corporations merging into one thing and then essentially becoming either monopolies or cartels, having cartel control of a sector that, yeah, you can't really Well, maybe you could still not call that capitalism because capitalism is pretty much about is about control over the economy by those people. So, uh, but yeah, I mean, you could also say that's the natural the end state of capitalism, right? That this is where it was always going to lead to, eventually. Um, but then you have to have a discussion about like what is capitalism? What do you guys think is capitalism? For me, it means the control of resources, the means of production, you might say, even by just a few wealthy interests, pretty much, who get to control the distribution of that. And the idea is it's more efficient that way. That was the capitalist argument. But so it sounds pretty similar to what we have now, in a way.
Yeah, not to drive too far into the techno feudalism book, but he's kind of describing capitalism in the I guess it's maybe more like the Adam Smith sense that we have this kind of fantasy that we're this little village with perfect knowledge of all the best chair maker in town will serve him or will buy from him more, and that'll make a better chair maker over there, and blah blah blah. That we're just so far beyond that when these techno companies, if you just think of things like Google Maps or something, if you're a farmer, if you're a hotel, if you're any kind of business, you have to be subservient to them so they'll show you results so that you get the business. You're paying rent to them. They control it in that sense.
Yeah,
Therefore, you can't innovate against them.
I guess that to what I'm saying is like that to me that is capitalism in a way. That's what I mean. Adam Smith is describing like specialization, and his famous example was nail making, right? Like it's so much more efficient when you have one guy making the one part of the nail, and he's kind of describing the way that nails are being manufactured. I haven't read all of The Wealth of Nations. It is a big book and kind of dry, I will say, um, but he's essentially for me describing
I mean, it was
how
written
that
in 1776, so I don't think he was going for the New York Times bestseller list. But yeah,
true. I mean, he's made the what you call it our modern conception of economics, at least in the Anglosphere. But no, I mean for me he was always describing factories, right? How factories were, and he's also describing what Ricardo then came along and gave that his model to, which is like the gains from trade, the comparative advantage, where one country produces all the wine, another country produces all the wool or whatever, and that they're better off. One country is better off just producing wine, and the other country is better off just producing wool. And but that's like those are the exact conditions for centralization and agglomeration, right? That eventually results in monopolies and stuff like that for me. Like the idea of you have a chair maker in a village who produces the best chairs and blah blah. That's I don't think of that. I don't consider that like necessarily as only a only a capitalist thing system. I would consider that um, just people existing before capitalism, maybe.
Yeah, I guess I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying. I guess I was saying maybe there's two sides to the same coin. In other words, it's not the system wasn't set up on the well, I shouldn't say it wasn't. I should say the idea wasn't predicated upon how can we establish a small cadre of rich people to rule them all. It was set up as a no, this will present a marketplace that will rise all ships if it plays itself out. Was the tagline it was sold on. It
Yeah,
evolves into what you're describing, but it wasn't meant in quotes to be that way.
I think also he's been what's the word I'm looking for? He's been kind of caricatured a little bit too. Like he understood even in his works how some of the runaway effects of like monopolies and capital control could be bad, and that where you might want like some government intervention even. Um,
Right.
And
uh,
and he was for public education system.
yeah, so he was for like public programs and stuff like that too. So so yeah, he's definitely been there. What Americans took from him and made into their ideology, even though he's a central figure in we could say neoliberal ideology, it's definitely a caricature, I think, of what he actually thought. Um, it's like they're just taking certain instances from the text and kind of making their own thing, like they haven't done that with anything else before. But um,
Yeah,
I,
there's a whole other book called Fantasyland. They don't touch on that exact example, but that same idea of repainting history to fit future narratives, and it's always this kind of utopian black and white view that conveniently omits the bad parts, but we do this over and over and over and over.
yeah, well, I was thinking of the Bible for one. It's like people are they just they have their ideology already, right? And they're just looking for citations from an authoritative text or figure that they can use to support what they think. Not they're not trying to like necessarily make a coherent or fully represent the things that they're citing. Um,
Yeah, actually, I had a religious reference kind of too. Like, I learned there's a thing called neo-orthodoxy. So around like the third or fourth century, Athanasius and Cyprian and all of them, they kind of they really revamp a lot of Christian beliefs, but they call themselves Orthodox and they call everybody else heterodox. But the scholars today they call it neo-orthodoxy because you're kind of like backward projecting your own ideas on what the prior 2 centuries of Christians believed, and they might have been even in agreement with your enemies, but you've just now coined yourself Orthodox.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard some of that creep up recently. Yeah, that idea.
So it's called
Like people trying
neo-Orthodoxy.
to people trying to form themselves as the new true Orthodox Christians that are these I think these neos that you're talking about. Yeah.
You could I mean yeah, orthodoxy is you could make an orthodox church that is like pro LGBT and women's rights and all that stuff and get citations from the Bible and say, "Oh, this was actually like what was that apostle's name? Was it Thomas, who is actually more progressive?"
Yeah.
Uh yeah, and
And then
so
there's like women mentioned as apostles in Paul's letters. So you could
yeah.
say like a woman could have leadership in the church and all that.
Mm.
Like, I think her name was Agrippa or something.
I think the interesting thing I remember reading about that was that the yeah, because the Bible has all these different um let's say directions you could take it with what's there, that the direction they decided to take it reflected Roman values, like the society that the Romans had, which was very patriarchal and stuff like that. So that's why Christianity kind of became that's a reason why in part it became a very patriarchal religion. What Yeah, Romans are a big problem in history. I really don't like them. Anyway, anyway, I'm gonna end the stream there. But that was a good conversation.
Yep.
Uh, Thanks guys
Thank you,
for
chat.
coming. And for
Thank you.
I think for I might move forward with the politics of time by Guy Standing. If you guys have heard of that,
I've not
it's
heard of it.
it's a shorter book. It's
No.
short. It's shorter than this one, so uh, it might be nice. But yeah, it's basically just talking about. I started it already. Actually, it's talking about the history. It's kind of like looking at it's a historical view of how time was handled. Pre-industrialization and then post-industrialization as well. Like how industrialization kind of changed, evolved our view of time basically. So even the fact that we we started we count the hours, right, that we work and stuff like that, and then we have working hours and stuff like that. all that evolved throughout time, and it wasn't at all the same. It was very radically different for
It wasn't as rigid as ours is.
yeah, and that was something that was actually heavily resisted, was that the fact that we started to measure time so rigidly. Um, so I thought it was interesting. I might go move forward with that unless anybody else has suggestions, but it's not a long book, so we'll see.
I would just suggest, you said the epilogue was really good. Maybe you just keep it one more week just for the epilogue, because I feel like there's a lot digging in there.
Okay.
I feel like the epilogue counts as a chapter. Yeah. All right, just let me know.
Section. Okay. We could also combine it with the first session.
Yeah.
Okay, we can do it that way. All right, guys. Thanks for coming. I'm gonna end it.